You're about to see a younger Mike Barnacle from more than a decade ago. He's expressing skepticism about the plan of some local developers, a plan to put six-figure income earners side by side with folks in subsidized housing. The site of this experiment? A place then known as Columbia Point, one of the city's worst addresses. Today it's known as Harbor Point, and many skeptics have become believers. Mike has more.
From Carson Beach on Dorchester Bay, you can see a sprawling 55-acre site near the John F. Kennedy Library. Harbor Point is a stunning seaside community, home to 3,000 people. Hard to believe it once looked like this. Harbor Point used to be called Columbia Point, an eyesore of a public housing project that went from bad to worse in the 1970s.
Someone asked you where you were from. You said Dorchester. You didn't say Columbia Point.
When it was run by the Boston Housing Authority, Columbia Point was a den of crime and drugs nicknamed Sin City.
We were isolated. One way in, one way out.
Then, in 1978, three developers came along and they had an idea that would change the way people thought about Columbia Point, an idea that would change the way people lived at Columbia Point.
Joe Corcoran and Joe Mullins were two of the masterminds.
15 years ago, you guys came here, you saw this. I know you thought something then, but you couldn't have thought this.
But they did.
What makes you think you're not going to end up with rich people living on the water and poor people living out in Mount Vernon Street?
Well, first of all, it's not going to work that way. And we're not going to have just the poor people living in one location. They'll be interspersed with everybody else.
Why this place is different and why it works is it's a mixed income development, and nobody really knows who hasn't got economic circumstances and who are the market rate folks.
Meaning, someone making $100,000 a year can have an apartment next door to someone paying as little as $25 a month in subsidized rent.
We believe very strongly that the way to house poor people is not to ghettoize them and put them all in big high-rise public buildings. Columbia Point stigmatized them. This place gives them a feeling of pride.
Diligent management, something that Columbia Point lacked, keeps the pride strong.
But it takes a lot of work. And that work includes getting up every workday and telling your maintenance staff, pick up the trash, remove graffiti, telling your resident service providers, get out there and meet with those families that had problems this weekend.
Ruby Jandu has seen it all since she came here 35 years ago.
Yeah, that's a long time, Ruby.
Yeah. But you know, there were some good times there too. You know,
sure.
There was always a sense of family here, you know, at Columbia Point.
Even in the worst of times.
Even in the worst of times, there was a sense of community.
Ruby was a key leader within Columbia Point's tight-knit community of mostly single mothers. Together, they became partners in the Harbor Point deal.
What did you think when these two white Irish guys in shirts and ties came in and said, you know, Ruby, we're going to change your life? I mean, what'd you think of them?
I thought they were absolute idiots. And I thought they thought we were crazy too, to believe that something of that magnitude could happen here.
Probably the greatest challenge at the start was to get to win the support and confidence of the residents. Once we finally had them on board, then it was a struggle together to win the support of the city, the state, and the federal government.
Jane Rossner wrote a book about Harbor Point's history.
All low-income housing has a very small chance of working. Mixed income can work. People paying full market rents will live next to people whose rents are completely subsidized.
Many agree, and the hope is that managers of troubled public housing projects around the country take a long, hard look at mixed income housing.
Joe grew up in South Boston. I grew up in Dorchester. They were mixed income neighborhoods. You know, you'd have a doctor living on the street, a fireman, school teacher. You know, I was one of the youngest of 8 children, and we were definitely economically poor, but culturally rich with that environment. Basically, we're trying to bring that back.
What are you most proud of?
I'm proud of the community as a whole. I think it's a decent place to live. I think it's a beautiful place to live. I think, for the most part, everyone here gets along. And I'm just proud to be a part of a creation of this sort, you know, from Columbia Point to Harbor Point.
Harbor Point. Chronicle will be back after this break.
Coming up Wednesday on Chronicle, Custom Made.